Hello, and a warm welcome to our weekly show, Love Athletics. In this program, we bring you the latest highlight from our sports with expert input from different continental areas. And we're delighted to have this week as our guest, Weldon Johnson, co-founder of Let'sRun.com website.
Hi, Anna. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, Weldon. Lovely to see you, and a big thank you for joining us.
Yeah, honored to be here. Great to see you.
Let's first take a look at what's been happening over the last 2 weeks. So starting with track and field, athletics events at the Chinese National Games concluded on Sunday, 26th of September in Xi'an, Shaanxi province. We will look in more detail at this event at the end of the show with a short report from Tony Doyujia. The South American Under-18 Championships also concluded on Sunday 26th in Encarnacion, Paraguay. Brazil dominated the event with 47 medals, 15 of them gold. But the focus is now mostly on road races. The first two World Marathon majors were held over the last 2 weeks. On 26 September, at the Berlin Marathon, Ethiopia's Guye Adola won the inaugural leg of the series, slowing down in the second part of the race to finish in 2 hours 05:45, ahead of Kenya's Bethwel Yegon, 2:06:14, and compatriot Keitany Sabekele, 2:06:47. The top 8 finishers in the men's race were all under 2 hours 10. In the women's race, victory went to Gotitom Gebreselassie in 20:09. The former world under-18 3,000-meter champion led a clean sweep for Ethiopia ahead of Hiwot Gebrekidan, 2:21:23, and Helen Bekele-Tola, 2:23:05. Weldon, what do you think of Keitany Sabekele's third place? He's already 39, and while he was speaking about world records before Berlin, it seems that his window of opportunity is closing.
Yeah, I think the world record talk needs to go. I was kind of encouraged, actually, by third place. Maybe that's not the right word, because anytime he runs and he talks about the world record, I'm like, oh, can he do it? And the race was quite early here in the United States. And I decided beforehand, I'm like, he can't get the world record, so I'm not going to wake up early for it. But then when I saw he went out in 101 flat and still ran, third place, I think 2:06. He's running New York City in a month. So I think the problem for him is he has all these other interests. His agent, Josh Herman, says he can't always train like he once did. But now he's very focused. He has another race coming up in a month. We know he's pretty fit. I think with super shoes, the recovery is easier. And he can get focused. New York, there's no chance to break a world record. You can just focus on winning. I think it'll be a great race in New York. Can we just get away from the world record a bit and see if a 39-year-old legend of the sport can win the New York City Marathon? And Kibiwott Candy will be there making a debut. It could just stars racing each other, I think a lot of times is what we need. I mean, world records are great when we get them, but Keitany doesn't need the marathon world record for his legacy. I mean, somehow he ran the 2:01:41 a couple years ago in Berlin. I'm still shocked by that one. No one saw that coming. So when he's still at 39, it's like, oh, I can get the world record. You're like, well, no, you can't. But if anybody can, you can.
Definitely. That's interesting. And yes, it was a bit surprised because after his fantastic career in cross country and track, the move to roads was not as successful for him as for Haile and for Paul Tergat, but still pretty good results. And as you see, we'll wait and see what happens in New York next month. So then on the following weekend, on the 3rd of October, we had the London Marathon. In the men's race, Sisai Lemma won his first world marathon major, 2 hours 04:01, ahead of Kenya's Vincent Kipchumba, 2:04:28, and Ethiopia's Mozinet Geremeyo with 2:04:41. But it's the women race that was really exciting. The London field included 9 athletes with PBs under 4:20, and the depth of the results was impressive. Jocelyn Jepkowski, whom we see here in the Valencia half marathon, where she won a silver in 2:18. In London, she clocked 2:17:43 to move up to 7th in the all-time list, ahead of Ethiopians Degitu Azmirao in 2:17:58 and Ashete Bekere in 2:18:18. Kenya's world record holder, Brigid Kosgei, was 4th in 2:18:40, and Israel's Lona Salpeter was 5th in 2:18:54. The fastest times ever were recorded for places 3, 4, and 5. So pretty amazing race, wasn't that, for the women, Weldon?
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, 5 women under 2:19. And I mean, John, the sport needs stars, kind of what I was saying about Keitany, but Jocelyn Jepkowski, she may be, I mean, I think, well, she's already won New York. Now she's run London. She beat this tremendous field. So I think that's a great story. And just the depth of women's marathoning. I mean, super shoes or not, 5 women under 2:19. And it shows what can happen. I think also London, no matter how many people did it, they said, we'll give you $75,000 if you break 2:19. And that's a great incentive. A lot of these women are like, okay, I can do that. And it's kind of crazy that many women can do it these days. But I think the sport is getting deeper and deeper, especially on the women's side now. I mean, we've had that way for the men's, but I think the opportunities 10 years ago weren't really there as much for the women. But track and field athletics, it's one of the sports where, relatively speaking, prize money, I mean, we don't see the appearance fees, but it's pretty equal across the sexes. So the women have a huge incentive to go out and run well, and they're doing that.
That's true. London, they had a huge payday for the women, giving the fantastic results. And as you said, they were generous in their bonuses, which is great news for the female runners who are now getting a lot of recognition. I think we should come back later in the, at the end of the year and have a discussion about super shoes and how they affect the roads and track. We've seen some pretty amazing results this year. But to get back to the last 2 weeks, there were several other top road races which took place on October 3rd. And a world record was set in the Giants Geneva 10K by Kalkidan Gezaheny, who clocked 29:38 to win over Kenyan's Agnes Tirop, who had set a women-only record over the distance just last month, and Selifin Chespol. The former Ethiopian, who was a star middle-distance runner as a junior, setting a world under-20 indoor mile record in 2:10, is now enjoying a second career peak as a Bahraini after taking silver in Tokyo Olympics over 10,000 meters. The men's race in Geneva was a clean sweep for Kenya, with Kibiwot Kandie clocking a PB 26:51, ahead of Felix Kipkoech 26:57 and Boniface Kibiwot 27:13. The Valencia 10K was contested earlier the same morning and also registered great performances, with Margaret Chelimo Kipkemboi clocking 29:50, which was briefly a world lead before the Geneva race was held. And her performance is still unequaled 4th in the all-time lists. Interestingly, the runner-up in Valencia was leading steeplechaser Nora Geruto in 30:08. The men's race was won by Norway's Zerei Kumbrom in 27:39, and he transferred from Ethiopia last year. But let's leave now recent events and have a chat with Weldon about his favorite moments. So first of all, I'd like to ask you, what are your three favorite moments in the sport, either as a runner or as a journalist fan throughout your career?
Ever. Well, you gave me fair warning for this question, which is good. It made me really think. And I think, I started out like everybody as a fan, even as a kid. But the 1996 Olympics were in America. So one of my top three for sure was Michael Johnson's 1932 200-meter world record at the Olympics in 1996. I mean, I knew enough about the sport, but I was sort of shocked. I thought the clock broke or something, because people just didn't. That record had been there for a long time, and people didn't run 19.3 back then. Well, they don't do it very often now either. And I was just out of college and with some friends, and we might have had one or two alcoholic beverages, and I was like, am I okay? Am I seeing the clock right? It was just a great moment. And also, home Olympics, everybody's super excited when an American wins. It was one of the iconic moments in the sport for me. Were you covering the sport then, Anna?
I was already working for the IAAF, but I wasn't in Atlanta. I stayed up at night and I watched the events, and that was indeed amazing. And of course, the record used to belong to Pietro Mennea, so there's a special connection for us there.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was about to say those Italian sprinters, there aren't many of them, but now there are again. So,
oh yes,
Italy, hidden sprint power.
Yep.
Yeah, it was just a great race. So my second favorite moment, a very obscure one, and I think it's one of the great things about the sport for some of these things. It's a worldwide sport. There's these regional events that sometimes you go to. There's amazing performances. People there are really into it. And so as a runner, I made the Pan Am Games in 2003. It was in Dominican Republic. And I was running the 10,000 meters. And so I stayed 1 or 2 days extra. And Felix Sanchez, he would be the double. I guess he hadn't won an Olympics then, I don't think. He'd eventually be a double Olympic champion. He was running before the home crowd in the 400-meter hurdles. And I've never seen anything like this. The crowd was more into it than the Michael Johnson. It was crazy. Like when I went to the stadium, they had this chain link fence up around the side of the stadium. It was like a mob scene. People trying to get in, they knocked down the fence and just storm in. And there was way more people than there were seats. They just crammed in, in your row, it didn't matter. People just came in the aisles. It was nuts. I mean, I see, it made me think back that you hear about the, horrific tragedy sometimes at like soccer/football matches, how you can have stampedes. And I just saw it. There was too many people and they wanted to see this thing. And they were going crazy. And fortunately he won. So it was just like a huge party atmosphere. And you just can't replicate that passion. I mean, the Tokyo Olympics this year were pretty amazing with no fans. I mean, that was the one thing I saw was like the sport speaks for itself. The performances speak for itself. But when you have fans, it's even better because I think there's so much joy that these athletes bring to the people watching at home or the people watching in the stands. Just that joy. I think that's why sports are so universally loved. Is it's kind of escape from our day-to-day, existence.
Yes, especially in the last year and a half, it hasn't always been easy for everyone. So definitely sport had a fantastic liberating effect, I'd say, and really enthusiasm ratcheted up to amazing levels. So what were your three favorite moments of this year of 2021?
Wait, I got one more for the all-time number three.
Yes.
And you were at this one. It was just the overall event. So I think it's the first time I met you. The 2007 World Cross Country Championships in Mombasa. I mean, there will never be an event like this. I mean, maybe there will be. You should never say never. But that was the thing. It was the first time I think cross country had been in like sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
It was this global event. People came out. It kind of reminded me of the Dominican Republic. There's just so many people. They had fences up and stuff, but people were like literally climbing in trees, hanging out to trees to look over the course. And then, to top it off, it was like, over 90 degrees Fahrenheit, super humid, the worst conditions I've ever seen for running. And it was in the middle of the day. I mean, athletes were like passing out, Bekele's melting down, they're dunking athletes in water. It was so, once again, the fans did it for me. I mean, the performances kind of were what they were, but it was more just the atmosphere and just the passion and all of that. I think I had been to Africa before, but never to Kenya. It was my first time to Kenya, the birthplace of running, sort of, or African great distance running in my mind. Well, I guess some Ethiopians would disagree with that, but it was just amazing. What did you think of the event?
You remember the huge roar from the crowd when Kenenisa got bogged down in this marshy part of the course, and Zersenai Tadesse took the lead? They cheered him like he was a Kenyan. It didn't matter if he was from Eritrea. It wasn't Kenenisa. It wasn't Ethiopia, and they were thrilled.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, you just heard this like roar, and you're like, "What's going on?" And it's funny because now I've seen videos, and I'm trying to think where I was if I was running around. I probably wasn't there at the exact moment he got passed. Like, I was probably in a different part of the course, but that was the one race they cared more than anything. Sort of like, the men's winner, it is the fastest person on the day. And the Kenyan people if a Kenyan wasn't winning, well, they didn't want an Ethiopian winning. So it just showed how passionate people are about sport and running. And I loved it. And it's great that, 14 years later, he's still there, still running. So that's one of the things. Like, you can have a career very long in the sport, and sort of, I grew up. I'm still kind of partial to Haile Gebrselassie because, like, when I really first started following, like at that '96 Olympics, he won the 10,000 meters, and I was really into distance running, and he came off the track, and I like reached out my hand, and like his finger graced, just touched my finger, and I was so excited. I mean, I was just a passionate fan for the sport. And then Kenenisa came along, and I, in my mind, somehow I said Haile was better. And then, now there's, Joshua Cheptegei and Mo Farah in between. But the kind of great thing is the generations overlapped for a little while.
Yeah, Haile definitely had this huge personality, and everything else he was doing, all his humanitarian work, and just his presence was huge and difficult to match for a young and shy athlete like Kenenisa. So what about 2021? What were your favorite events, favorite moments of this year?
It's interesting because, I didn't go to Tokyo, so all three of these were at the Olympics, but I feel like I was there. Like, that just shows how great, one, HDTV is, but just, you can be just as passionate about the sport if you're there, if you're not. And people now sometimes will ask me like, "Oh, you've seen all these world records. Which one was your favorite one in person?" And I'm like, I sometimes have trouble remembering which event I was actually physically at, but, Karsten Warholm's 45:94 world record. I screamed at the TV. I just was like, what? It was kind of like the Michael Johnson. You're like, you're not supposed to see a 45 for hurdles. So, and I kind of expected the world record to fall. I thought they would break the world record, and just sort of that, these moments that sort of, and I'm a journalist, so I get sort of skeptical. I'm used to world records being broken. I have to be, analyze the shoes or the tracks and this sort of stuff. But when I'm totally shocked by something, it's what I love about sport. Just, even though I kind of expected the record to go, I just didn't expect the 45:94. And it was a great race too, on top of it. it wasn't, there was some doubt whether he would win until, pretty much after the last hurdle. So that was one of the great all-time runs. But then for whatever reason, the next day when City broke the record, it wasn't the same feeling for me. I expected it even more than, which isn't fair to her, like, because her and Bilal Muhammad, I mean, that was a great race and they crushed the old record, but there was something about the 45 going on the clock that did it for me. And
I can understand that.
Yeah. And then even I think, there's part of it too, like with stereotypes. I think people now, we stereotype stuff, and that's one of the beautiful things about running. It's so universal. But sort of like the concept of like a white guy from Norway being one of the best sprinters in the world, it defies stereotypes. So I think, that's a good thing. One of the greatest things about the sport is like anybody can do it. We have, we now even have javelin throwers, from Kenya and stuff. Like it's not just distance runners from Africa, and we're getting even like more technical events throughout the world. And, certain areas have, like the Japanese love the marathon and Kenyan loves the distance running and Jamaican loves the sprints, but the sport's so universal. Do you want my number 2 and 3 for the Olympics?
2 and 3.
Okay. Well, my second one, it's a little U.S. centric, but Athing Mo, the high school superstar, she ran 1:55 to like dominate the Olympics. And by the time we got to the final, I thought that's what she would do, but she's such a young kid. You're not 100%. She's not faced by the pressure. You can kind of see some of the athletes, how they react. And, maybe the Olympic final would be different and she would freak out, but nothing she did up until that point, showed that she would. And there's Keely Hutchinson, who's also the same age. I think they're both 19 now. And it's crazy how good and fast they are at such a young age. And so then after Athing finished, she came up, and Raven Rogers of the U.S. came on late to get the bronze. And there was this moment after, I think it popped up on the screen because it was pretty close for the bronze, that Raven got the bronze. And Athing like had this look of joy. I think she hugged Raven. It was just like the purest thing of like, she was so excited for her. I assume their friends or teammate, just like, oh my gosh, you got the bronze. And I'm like, the personality of Athing Mo came out. I first met her probably, I guess it was probably 3 years ago now. She broke the American record for 600 meters, which is kind of an obscure distance, but she almost ran the fastest time ever. And she was a high school kid. And she just kind of had this youthful exuberance, and she still has it. She's just so pure, and this joy was there. She just, had the greatest moment of her life personally, yet she could still express this joy for her teammate. Like, I don't know. I just thought it's what sport's about. Sure, we focus on winning and losing ourselves, but like there's this camaraderie there that I thought was so pure and just wonderful. I think it's not just about winning and losing.
She definitely had an impressive season, not just in Tokyo, but her whole season has been great. So we have a lot to look forward to for, I think, for next year, running the World Championships at home.
Yeah, I think like America plays up Allison Felix. I mean, Allison Felix is the most medaled American ever on the track. So she rightfully deserves the attention. But Athing now has as many individual gold medals at the Olympics as Allison. And I think she's not as well known here as almost she should be, because then she came back. She runs the 4x4. It was like a dream team. They get the gold medal. But there's a chance down the road she could do the 400 and 800. I mean, and she's so young. I mean, I think she really is set up to be sort of the face of American. Well, I was about to say, I don't even know what to call it. Sprinting, distance running, it's both, mid-distance. So I think once her story gets out more, I think her personality is so great. Hopefully people eat it up and love it. And we'll have the 2028 Olympics here in America. So I think it's a great opportunity for the sport to grow.
It would be great because as you say, she was number 2 in the world list at 400 at some point. I think she went a little bit lower down at the end of the season, but she's also very, very good on 400. So
yeah, but I mean, coming into the season, she said, it's funny because she's like, I'm an 800 meter runner, and she'd only run 201, and she was this really good high school, but she was so fast. I'm like, well, maybe she's really just a 400, 600 runner. And she was running these good 400 times, and then she started running good 800 times indoors. And then I remember thinking, like, I said to Robert Johnson, my brother and co-founder of Let's Run, and Jonathan Galt on one of our podcasts, I was like, could she win the Olympics at the 800? She was so young and she had never broken 201 before. And sure enough, she didn't win. She dominated.
Right. Mm-mm.
And then, so my other great moment from the Olympics was Sifan Hassan, just in general, attempting the triple. People said, oh, you can't do that. And she's like, it's not about just winning for me. It's more about like kind of pushing the boundaries and seeing what I can do. And I love that idea and that concept. She kind of said that before the Olympics, before she started the triple. And the people still said, well, she's not really going to do this, is she? And she did it. I mean, she didn't win all 3. She lost the 1500, but I mean, Faith Kipyegon, no one was really going to beat her. But to top it off, I mean, she won the gold in the 10K, almost looked like it almost, killed her in the race. She was so tired afterwards. Won the 5,000. That was kind of easier for her. But then kind of in between in the 1500 semifinals, she falls down and is last place with a lap to go and picks herself up and wins the heat. I mean, it was so unnecessary. She didn't need to win the heat, but I think it shows her mentality. She's just like, I'm doing the best I can do. I'm not going to let what people traditionally think can be done affect me. I don't know. Other athletes fall down and they kind of think, oh, I'll probably be put in the final anyway. I don't need to get up. Instead, she got up and won the race. It was just so crazy. I don't know, even though that wasn't the final. And I think when we talk about the Olympics, it'll probably be forgotten, 10 years from now. Her picking herself up in that 1500, it might have been just kind of my favorite moment, just kind of what she represents.
That's great. Now, Weldon, let's talk about letsrun.com. It's a hugely popular website with runners and athletes worldwide, including elite runners. How did you and your brother Robert come up with the idea?
Well, we argue who came up with the idea. So we're identical twins. So we always steal each other's ideas. I'm sure I came up with it. So it started in the year 2000, and I was a runner back then. I had a job in like economic consulting, which, it was a full-time job, and I'd made the Olympic marathon trials, and like 125 people made that back then in the United States, and the top 3 make the Olympics. So if you're like the 100th guy where I am, the Olympics is really more of a pipe dream than anything else. But my coach kept saying, you can get better, you can train at altitude. And I think he's a real genius. And I was like, well, but he doesn't operate in the real world. I'm like, look, I'm working 40, 50 hours a week. I can't keep doing this forever. My friends go to happy hour after work and I go running every day. So I moved out to Flagstaff, Arizona to train at altitude for just 4 months. I quit my job. I was doing some remote work still for them, but I was a young kid, no responsibilities. I had saved a little money. I'm like, well, this will be my training thing. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do with my time? Like, you can only run so many hours a day, and people forget, but the internet was pretty new in 2000. I mean, now there's everything on the internet. There's, chess websites, running websites, artistic websites. There's a website for everything. Back then, there really wasn't. I mean, there was like Runner's World magazines. There was a couple other running sites with forums that I liked, and you could talk to people throughout the world. And I always loved forums. So I just kind of thought like, well, we can start a website. And part of it was I wanted to spread the wisdom of my coach, John Kellogg. I thought he was a genius, and I thought training knowledge, it wasn't as widespread then. There were some books, like Arthur Lydiard writes books, people write books, but unless you had the book, a lot of the stuff wasn't in there. People didn't run as much in the United States back then. And I'm like, you need to run more mileage. That was my sort of belief. And I'm like, well, we tried to combine a few things. Like one, kind of get the training knowledge out there. And then we liked forums. So we're like, we'll start a forum and kind of have a forum more dedicated to the elite end of the sport. And then gradually, like we had a quote of the day to try to get people to come back every day. We just kind of made it up as we went along. And originally we weren't doing tons of news. Like then it was new. Like you could just talk to an athlete about anything. Like that was sort of new, not have to wait for a monthly magazine to come out or something. So we would just do some interviews and that sort of thing. And then we realized, wait, nobody really just covers the sort of Olympic and professional elite end of the sports. We started just kind of branching into doing more news. At first it was a little weird for me because I was still competing. So I didn't want to finish a meet and then go interview somebody. So we've kind of slowly developed more into the news stuff, but then we realized we can highlight the best. If the New York Times has a great article in running, or the Sean Engel in the Guardian has a great article, we don't have to write everything ourselves. We can highlight the best coverage of running kind of throughout the world and make Let's Run sort of the home of professional distance running. So that's kind of how it evolved. So we've always there's two main focuses. One is the news side of the sport. And, we go to the Olympics, we're credentialed journalists, that sort of stuff. But then we've also embraced the fans and the forums and letting people express their opinions. Every other sport, people get so passionate about football and they debate this transfer window and the signings and all of this stuff. And so track and field, there needs to be a place where fans can, talk about Sifan Hassan's triple and the thing Mo and just kind of the rumors, and they can be fans and be passionate, because I think that's what fans want. And if our sport's serious, that's what our sport needs. So the community side of Let's Run's always been a big part as well.
Yeah, the message board is indeed world famous.
Or infamous, depending on your view,
Well, yes, but that sometimes is people who want you to give politically correct coverage or replies, but you need a bit of spontaneity in life and in sports commentary as well.
Yeah, I think most people especially people who are on the forums a lot, they get it, and we're seeing it in this now with Twitter and Facebook. That any open platform on the internet, you're going to have problems. If I could have a forum and only have, nice comments, I guess I would. But that's also not the real world. Fans are going to be passionate. No, I don't like that runner. They really annoy me. And why can't a fan express that? That sort of stuff. And, there's other types of posts that sort of cross lines. We moderate tons of posts, and you're never going to create the community that's perfect, but that's the real world. The internet, it's like a subculture of the greater society. So I love forums. I don't know. I just always have, because I started off just as hey, these so-called experts, they don't know everything. And next thing you know, now I'm viewed as an expert on running, but I just started off as a fan. So I think there's the wisdom of the people in Let's Run, just some of these posters and fans of the sport is amazing, and they have great insights. So I love that part of it.
That's great. Thanks, Weldon. Let's get back now to the upcoming events. So marathon majors, we've got the next two taking place back to back in the next few days, with Chicago Marathon this Sunday, 10th of October, and Boston on Monday, 11th. Now, Chicago Marathon, they had quite a few significant changes announced just 5 days before the race, but elite fields are still very, very good. 7 men with PBs under 206, 5 with a PB under 205, and just 1 woman with a PB under 220, Ruth Chepengetich. Boston Marathon fields include 6 men with PBs under 206 and 3 women with PBs under 220. Weldon, how do you see Chicago and Boston events?
Yeah, I mean, the Chicago thing was kind of crazy. They took like 14 athletes out or 17 out and added 14 this week. And I'm like, what is going on? You never really see that. But running just in general, I think all sports have this. You sort of need the stars, and some of them really aren't. Well, you have Ruth Chepngetich, you have Sarah Hall. There are storylines in each race. That's in Chicago. But I think big picture, Chicago's first. Let's do Chicago. You may not have the depth. You have one woman under sub 220, but Ruth Chepngetich, I mean, she's former world champion. She's run a 104 for the half marathon. So she should win, but like the American story, people love that, the local story. Sarah Hall, everyone was talking, could she break Dina Castor's American record? But now she's like, look, I'd much rather win the race. Winning the race would be a better deal for me. So, that's a good story there. The men's side, it's like, way more, there's more athletes. It's a little more wide open. But it's kind of crazy because it's like tennis, if there's not like a Djokovic, a Federer, or Nadal, we're like, oh, who are these? Who are some of these people? Like, I think Ruben Kipyego he's run 2:03:55, and I think it was the Milan Marathon that didn't even win, but he may be the favorite for this race, and just shows like running is so. We have our superstars and we need them, but there's like opportunity for everybody to sort of break out and make their name. And you win one of these majors, it's a huge opportunity to sort of create a name for yourself, become the next star. And some people only win one major and that's it. And that's great. And then we have, Galen Rupp for the local angle. He's won Chicago before. He's here this time. I don't know why he's not getting as much attention this year, but the guy's got a chance for sure. So I think that's kind of the storylines in Chicago. The men's race is more wide open, and you got Galen Rupp and some Americans. The women's race, I mean, it's Ruth Chepngetich's to lose, but Sarah Hall's there. You still got some stories you can, talk about for a couple hours. And then Boston, we're going to have too much time to talk about it because Boston's the next day. And then that's never happened before. Boston Marathon usually is in the spring. It's kind of the end of winter. And no, it's the day after Chicago this year. And Boston, I think both races, they have a lot of like depth, but no sort of like, no huge favorites. I mean, on the like women's side, people like Edna Kippelgat are in there, but she was really good, like 5 years ago. So you have some names, but Lisa DeCisa, he's good, but like he's trying to come back from the Olympics and that sort of stuff. So I think the races are wide open on both sides. And then Boston, part of it for me is like, it's great because it's the hills, the course, it's point to point. There's some beauty in, I think, the Boston type courses, the New York type courses, where it's just not pancake fast. The time isn't as important. You have the mystique of the marathon. What's going to happen? Can people blow up? That sort of thing.
It's true. And you mentioned that all the world majors this year are being held in autumn, including those like Boston and London, which normally take place in spring. But because of COVID disruptions, everything is now crowded into the autumn. Now, Shalane Flanagan has announced that she intends to run them all. So far, she clocked 2:38:52 in Berlin, 2:35:04 in London. But will she really be running back-to-back marathons in Chicago and Boston? What do you think?
She's doing it. I think it's great. Now, at first, when this came out, I was just, I think I'm too jaded sometimes. I'm around such the elite end of the sport. So I'm like, oh, whatever. This is some publicity thing. 3 hours isn't that hard for her. She said the stated goal is to run sub 3 hours in all of them. But then she runs 2:38 and 2:35. And I'm like, okay, that's some serious running. She's doing her best in, these races. She's really pushing herself. So then I'm like really intrigued by the challenge. And then I'm like, wait, she has races back to back. Like, this could be disaster. Like, who knows what's going to happen? She's got to run Chicago on Sunday and then come back the next day. And if she goes too hard in Chicago, I mean, I don't know if you've ever run a marathon, Anna, but when I run a marathon, I can't really walk the next day. So how's she going to do this? And she's shown she's not just content to just run, 2:58, mail it in. So I'm really intrigued by what she's doing. And my wife had a work event last night, and she's like, we don't talk about running that much. She's run a couple marathons, but running's kind of my thing. And she's like, the Boston Marathon's this weekend. And I'm like, did you know that? Or like, weren't you going or something? And I was like, I don't know, COVID. I'm not sure. I probably should have gone. And then I was like, Chicago is on Sunday. And somehow this Shalane thing came up. And my wife was just blown away. Like, what? And then she said, is she going to fly private plane? I'm like, this isn't professional baseball or basketball or football. No, she's a runner. I assume she's on a commercial plane between the two places. But she's like, how is she going to do it? And I think there's this element that we all can relate to. 2 marathons in 2 days, especially if you're trying to run them kind of hard, it's not easy. So I'm very intrigued by this now. I think a lot of people are.
That's really going to be a great storyline, and also be really curious to see. And as you said, Shalane could have run them slowish, but she's going all out, which is great. It really is a challenge. It's not something that she's doing just to say, okay, I can tick a box, I've run them all. She's giving it all.
Yeah, it's great.
Now, we touched on this briefly earlier when you mentioned the fact that there were no spectators in Tokyo. After Berlin and London, a lot of the athletes were saying how great it is to have spectators back on the course cheering them on. As a runner yourself, how much of a boost do you get from fans cheering you on the way?
I mean, I loved it. I don't know. I can even... No, maybe because I wasn't like competing at the Olympics, but I could at certain meets, especially even once Let's Run started, like I would run the 10,000. So you're going around a lot, and you could pick out certain people cheering for you. Like it's weird how certain voices would stand out, or you could always hear your coach, even though there's like a big crowd. And then yet at the same time, you can be very focused on like your own race. But I think for sure, like the marathons, I ran New York, I guess only once. And it was right after 9/11. That's crazy. It was 20 years ago. And I wasn't having the best day. And I came over to this bridge, I think, into Harlem. And this lady was standing there just by herself. It's like one of the few parts of the course where there's not a ton of people. And she was like, thank you so much for coming out and supporting our city. Wow. And I was like, what? Like this lady has it backwards. Like the city is putting on this great event after 9/11, they're showing that we can go on and that we can all come together. And I think, after COVID, we're human, we're social creatures. We need to all come together. So I think having these events and having crowds, the world needs that. People need that. We're social creatures. And I think that even that's one thing. Maybe I should have gone to Boston just to sort of get out of my little bubble. I see neighbors and friends and people around, but I just haven't been going to as many things and I miss it.
Yeah. Well, talking about spectators and mass participation events, I'd like to highlight the news from the Vienna Marathon, because 16 days after it was contested, on the 12th of September, studies showed that not a single coronavirus case was associated with the event, which saw 6,000 runners in the marathon and 18,000 across all distances. So that's great news and shows that with proper measures, large sports event can safely be held and spectators can enjoy the show.
Yeah, that was great news. I mean, I think one thing going for running, like we kind of thought what's crazy, you think back a year ago, almost everything was canceled. Yeah. But people were saying at the time, some of the scientists were like, hey, outdoors seems pretty safe. And people are like, oh, but you're breathing on people. And, we just didn't know. And yeah. I think now, like, even here, we're having like football events, American football, and a lot of fans outdoors, and they haven't had a lot of COVID, fortunately. So, ideally, I want the world to go back to complete normal, but even if it's just outdoor events we can have, well, that's still pretty good for the sport of running because the vast majority of our events are outside.
Yeah, great. No, really, really good news. And now I'd like to pay homage to some great runners. And with the London Marathon just concluded, it seems a good moment to speak about one of my favorite athletes, Mary Jepkosgei Keitany. Keitany announced on the 22nd of September that she was retiring from competitions after struggling to fully recover from a hip injury that she sustained during the 2019 London Marathon. I remember meeting Mary at the 2:07 World Road Running Championships in Udine, where she placed second behind Lorna Kiplagat, who set a world record on the marathon distance. And then she was helping translate for Mary in the post-event press conference. It was her first major championship, and Mary was still uncharacteristically shy. Keitany went on to a stellar career. So after the silver in 2007, she won gold in 2009 at the Half Marathon Championships. Then she was 3 times a London Marathon winner. And 4 times a New York Marathon winner. In 2011, she set a world half marathon record on the fast Ras Al Khaimah course with 1:05.5. The first time a woman had dipped under 1:06. That mark has since been improved, but Keitany still holds the women-only marathon world record with 2:17.07 clocked in London in 2017. So she was always one of my favorite athletes for her personality as for her running. So during the Day in the Life series in Kenya in 2012, we went to Iten to meet her, to watch one of her training sessions and visit her family home. So this is Mary just outside the home. Mary's husband, Charles Koech, was also a talented runner, but he later focused on assisting his wife's career and was her training partner. I love some of the shots you get of the athletes training up in the Rift Valley. We were invited to their home for tea, delicious Kenyan tea with milk and ginger. If you look at the number of mugs and glasses in the cupboard behind them, it's clear that Charles and Mary love having friends come around. The couple's daughter, Samantha, was not born yet, but a young cousin was living with them and their son, Jared. Goodbye, Mary. I'm going to miss you. So, Weldon, I read the post on letsrun.com detailing how you were escorting Paula Radcliffe when she set the world record during the 2002 Chicago Marathon. Tell us about that experience and why you think so highly of Paula.
Well, the experience was great. I mean, I think highly of Paula because she's an all-time great, just like Mary. The Mount Rushmore, that's like the 4 presidents of the United States. So we always talk about like the 4 great runners. They're definitely on my Mount Rushmore of women's marathoning. But Paula, I mean, I paced her to her first world record in Chicago. She ran 2:17 that day, which was kind of unheard of. And then the next year in London, she ran 2:15.25. And even though I'd paced her to 2:17, I was shocked. It just was like, what? So the Chicago run, I mean, she ran the 2:17 and it was really windy the back part of the race, the last 6 miles or so. And, there's sort of a unspoken rule, men pacing women. What are you really supposed to do? So I was really running to the side of her at the end. And it was really windy. It was not breaking the wind or anything. And the only thing Paula really said to me during she missed the mile split. She said, "What was the mile split?" And I told her, and it was slower. And she just let out this yell, like, "What?" And put down her head in the wind and started running even faster. I mean, it was just amazing to see that firsthand, witness it, because I knew we'd slow down because of the wind, but she wasn't going to let the wind slow her down. So in less than perfect conditions, she ran a 2:17. And I think the next year she showed, with males really pacing in front of her, breaking the wind, what she could do, 2:15.25. And I think without super shoes, that would still be the world record. I mean, Bridget Kosgei, 2:14.04, that's crazy. And no one's really come close to either one of those. I mean, you have Mary's time, 2:17, but sub 2:17 times are still, they're not happening. And the fact that Paula did this, 18 years ago, it's absolutely astounding.
So let's move back now to recent events with a report from Do Yujia on the Chinese National Games.
Hello everybody, I'm Tony, Uchida of China, an athletics reporter. Thanks Anna so much to let me join a great athletics show. We love athletics. Just 10 days ago, the 2021 National Games of China came to an end. Starting in 1959, this year's National Games is the 14th. Just like Olympics, the National Games of China was held every 4 years. It is the most important sports competitions in China. How important is it? Every time, the Chinese president will announce the opening of the games. In the first National Games in 1959, the then Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai even served as the timing referee for the women's 200 meters. For many Chinese athletes, they will regard the National Games as their highest stage. For high-level athletes, even superstars like Gong Lijiao and Su Bingtian, they are first, and for most members of the provincial team, representing their province to participate in the National Games. Every province attaches great importance to the National Games because the result of the National Games directly demonstrate the achievements of the province sports culture, or we can say sports work. This is a government action. So the PKs in the National Games are so fierce, even higher than the international competitions. In China, athletes' success in participating in the Olympics is more of an honorable reward, and if they can achieve good results in the National Games, it is directly related to their salary, bonus, jobs, and even personal future. Therefore, many athletes will choose to retire after National Games. As for this year's National Games, there are many good results in athletics. For example, Su Bingtian won men's 100 meters in 9.95 seconds, and the Shandong men's relay team set an Asian record for the men's 4x200 meter relay, and so on. Okay, that's all for my sharing. Thanks so much.
So big thank you to Yujia. It's really interesting to hear how important the Chinese National Games are in China, because we don't really realize outside. I mean, having the Premier Zhou Enlai as a referee in the 200 meters is a fantastic story. Now, the importance of the Games is reflected in the results, which Yujia also kindly sent, and which show a very high number of personal bests, even among the medalists. Top results, in addition to Su Bingtian's 9.95, include, of course, the 4x200 meters world lead and Asia record by Team Shandong in 1:20.83, with just 1,000th of a second separating Shandong and Guangdong province, who benefited from Su Bingtian running the first relay. The decimals, 8:22 versus 8:23. Other top men's results include Yao Jie's 580 in the pole vault, Wang Jinan's 826 in long jump, and Wu Ruiting's 1728 in triple jump. On the women's side, Ge Mangi achieved a sprints double, while Tokyo Olympics 800 meters fifth placer Wang Chunyu did even better, adding a silver in the 400 to her goals over the 8 and 1500. Top performances in the throws came from Gong Li Jiao, 1988 in the shot put, and Fen Bing, who set a discus PB with 65.85. The women's 20-kilometer race walk was a high-level and highly contested event, won by Yang Jianwu in 1:27.14, with all three medalists finishing within 33 seconds. So finally, European Athletics announced the finalists for European Athletes of the Year and Rising Stars Award. And here they are. For European Athlete of the Year, the trio on the men's side, Mondo Duplantis, who jumped 12 times 6 meters or higher. Marcel Jacobs, gold medalist in Tokyo in the 100-meter and in the sprint relay. And Karsten Warholm, and we heard Weldon speaking about his prodigious world record. On the women's side, we have another of Weldon's favorites, Sifan Hassan, Maria Lasitskene, who had a great season, not only with the gold after the trouble she had with injuries in late May. She rose to 2:05 in the Diamond League final, so a great year for her. And the third finalist is Anita Włodarczyk, who became the first woman to win 3 Olympic titles. Rising stars in alpha order. On the men's side, Cristian Che of Slovenia, the first under 23 discus thrower to break the 70 meters barrier. Then Alessandro Sibilio, 400-meter hurdles finalist in Tokyo, and he got 2 golds at the European Team Championships in his specialty event and in the 4x4 relay. Third nominee is Sasha Zoya of France, 110-meter hurdles, gold medalist at the World Under-20 Championships in Nairobi, where he twice set a World Under-20 record. On the women's side, Radisat Adeleke of Ireland won double sprint gold at the European Under-20 Championships. Femke Bol. Now, Femke, of course, was third at the Olympic Games because she had both Sydney McLaughlin and Dalila Mohammed in front of her. But she is the first athlete to have recorded 4 races under 53 seconds in one season. And she also excelled on the 400-meter flat. And finally, to complete the trio of finalists for Rising Star, Keely Hodgkinson. She set an 1,800-meter world indoor under-20 record in January, which was later bettered by Athing Mo. Then she was a European indoor champion, and she was second behind Athing at the Olympic Games. Winners will be announced at the Golden Tracks ceremony in Lausanne next week on the 16th of October. So let's do a quick recap of what's coming up on the calendar as we reach the end of the show. Top events in the next 2 weeks include road races, but also area age category championships. So as we saw, this Sunday, Chicago Marathon, Monday, Boston Marathon. On the weekend of the 16th and 17th of October, South American Under-23 Championships take place in Guayaquil, Ecuador. On the 17th of October, we have the Amsterdam Marathon and also a series of other marathons, including Paris. And finally, Friday 22nd to Sunday 24th, the Pan American Under-20 Athletics Championships will take place in Concepcion in Chile. So still a lot of athletics action to look forward to. So we're now at the end of the show, and it was really great having Weldon join us with his wealth of experience on running and road running in particular.
Thank you, Anna. This was fun. And I learned stuff too about the Chinese games, and I like the international flavor of the show.
Great. Thanks a lot. I definitely loved this. I hope our viewers enjoyed it as much as I did. And thank you all for watching. See you all in 2 weeks on Love Athletics to look together at the highlights, comments, and analysis from what's been happening in our sport over the last fortnight. Thank you. Take care. Ciao.